Hey there, CPO here, and today is a Metalcloak day. That's right, Metalcloak fenders front and rear, as well as rear corner armor and rear Metalcloak LED tail lights are going on overclocked. So as you can see, I've done some prep work. I have removed my fenders that I already had on there. I had some Smittybilt XRCs, and if you want to see how to remove those, you can go back and look at my Smittybilt XRC install video, play it backwards. Boom, problem solved. I also show you in that video series how to remove the factory Jeep fenders and fender liners if you need to get that. But once we get everything off, now it's time to do the install. Let me show you a couple of things that I'm curious about as I get started. All right, so I do have this Rugged Ridge snorkel system, and what it does is it runs inside the fender and then out through. So that's going to create some challenges both with the fender install as well as the fender liner install. So this is going to get in the way of the fender liner back here. So with the fender install, these Metalcloaks have some reinforcing standoffs to help support this flimsy sheet metal. I'm not going to be able to put those in here because I have an air box thing right here. So I'm gonna have to figure out how that's going to work. So that's my real challenge here on the passenger side. The driver's side should go pretty easy. There's nothing fancy right there. My other concern is going to be here in the rear, because I did get the corner armor with the headlight, and I have this Poison Spider rear tire carrier. So I'm curious to see how well those play together. There's not a lot of room there, so not sure how that's going to work, but we're going to figure it out. And you'll see it when I do. I never did paint those inner wells, but eventually I'm gonna do that. I don't know if I'll do it today, but I'll do it eventually. So anyway, let's check out what I actually got to install. I got everything black powder coated from the factory because I didn't want to have to deal with doing powder coating locally. And that's always a risk because powder coating gets damaged and dinged up in shipping, but I will tell you, all of these parts are so well packaged. Look how big this box is for these. There's just 4 of these little thin pieces in there and some other hardware. The rest of it's all padding. So they did a really great job of protecting them from shipment. All right, so one thing I do know I have to do is cut off this fender support bracket that comes on there from the factory. I didn't need it with my Smittybilt fenders, I just never cut it off, but now's the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that off. And I'm gonna kind of work back and forth between the passenger side and the driver's side and just take care of things on both sides at the same time. I'm gonna cut the passenger, cut the driver. When I have to file out holes on the passenger, I'll go do the same thing on the driver. So I'm gonna go back and forth. It's a little bit atypical of what you see in a usual install video. Usually it's one side start to finish, but I'm gonna go back and forth and knock everything out. And again, this is gonna be my problem side. So if you're installing these fenders, or any fenders for that matter, with a Rugged Ridge modular snorkel, you're probably gonna wanna see how I make this thing work. And I'm not sure how that's gonna be yet, but we're gonna find out really soon. It may be it fits just perfectly, except I just don't have the support bracing that I would normally have. It may be I have to do some modification. I don't know, we'll find out soon though. All right, so for touching up any bare metal that I generate during this process, I'm just using this flat black. It's a 2-in-1 paint and primer. It's black. You can get it body matched. I'm not really concerned about that. It would be easier if I had a black Jeep, but I don't. So this is an anvil color, but for stuff like this, it isn't really visible. I don't really care. This is a little bit more tactical than a spray paint. I can limit my paint my odd colored paint to just the shiny spots. All right, so I know I am gonna have to use this top bracket right up into here. And I also know that these 3 holes on the factory fender tend to not align, and that's the case on mine as well. Yeah, crazy. So what you want to do, you want to take your factory bolts that you took off with your fender. You did keep those, right? You need those, at least some of them. And I'm going to go ahead and bolt this in place. So this was a great idea I saw on one of the install videos from another world famous YouTuber, of course. And I thought it was a great idea to go ahead and mount this up first. You can see the cutout for that factory bracket. You can leave that on there, but if you're looking for clearance, that's just going to be in the way, so you may as well get rid of it. And you can see you can do a pretty crappy job of painting it, and it's pretty well hidden. So feel free to make that whole thing black in there if you want. Actually, taking a can of spray paint and just painting that black would help this blend in. Anyway, so I've got all 3 of these that I'm gonna have to file down, and it's looking like I gotta go to the first crease at least. So that's what I'm gonna use as a guide. There's a sort of a protrusion here. I'm gonna go to the top of that protrusion first and see where that gets me on alignment. That's exactly what I'm looking for right there. Got these 3 in, these 2 are in, they're just not tight. All right, now I'm gonna go do the same thing to the other side. Now don't assume what you did to one side is gonna be automatically what you need to do to the other side. The way these Jeeps are built, there's a dramatic variance from Jeep to Jeep and even from side to side. Of course, hopefully, what you learned on one side can be applied to the other. And it looks like it's gonna be about the same all the way down to this first seam of that protrusion. So I'm gonna work off that. So it turns out both sides are identical on my Jeep, but your Jeep may be completely different. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and remove these button screws. These are the 3/4 inchers. And I'm gonna hang my fender in place so that I can see where everything else is gonna line up. So this is still a little bit loose, and I'm gonna leave it loose for just a second. All right, so I've got this thing sort of mocked up in here, and I have a couple of holes that are pre-existing. I have a few holes I'm gonna need to drill. What I'm looking for is just the best alignment front to back. So what that leaves me with is I need to drill a hole here, I need to drill a hole here, and that's just gonna fit on the top of this air box. I'm supposed to drill a hole here, but as you can see, I've got plastic back here, so I am not going to use that one. And then I've got this one down here below that fits okay. So basically, it looks like with this Rugged Ridge snorkel system, I'm going to lose one mounting point, which isn't bad, actually. That's better than I expected. I kind of thought I was going to lose 2. I still don't know how that's going to impact the inner fender liner, but yeah, I'm super happy about that. And yeah, you may have noticed, I'm not taping this thing up for the mock-up. To be honest with you, What's underneath here isn't super pretty anyway. I've already had fenders pressed against that. There's some paint wear. There's a little bit of rusting here and there. There's some crud in there. So yeah, scratches behind this thing don't bother me, but I understand some of you are going to be interested in trying to protect everything as good as you can. So use that masking tape to cover that up. But you know, I'm not so concerned with that. Overclocked has sort of been around the block a few times, if you know what I mean. And those things don't matter so much. All right, remember, I can't put a hole here because of that air box. But I think I can squeeze one right across the top here. Right there. I'm gonna go ahead and widen these. Not widen them, but lower them down some. Slot them. All right, so hopefully you can see in there, basically I'm right above this air box. And I put this standoff in there and pushed it down as level as I could. It's actually gonna be resting on the snorkel air box, but that's fine. I think that's gonna work perfect. And that gets me some support there. Like I said, the only one I'm missing support on is that one down below, but I think we'll be fine without that one. I'm so confident those are gonna be right. I'm gonna go ahead and paint those holes. And while those holes are drying, I'm gonna do the same thing to the driver's side. All right, one thing I don't think I mentioned on the other side was to make sure you pull out this pinch seam bolt. This is actually gonna go into the bottom of the flare, and you wanna make sure that that hole is also in alignment as you're doing the rest of the alignments. Now, of course, on this side, I've got access to put in both of those standoffs. So I'm gonna now drill both of those. Everything else looks about the same. So on these standoffs, there's actually a longer one and a shorter one. The longer one has 2 lines, the shorter one has 1 line. The longer one's gonna go on this bottom one. I didn't have to worry about this on the last one because I had that air box in the way. And then the shorter one is gonna go at the top hole. So same thing I did before. I'm just gonna sort of use a clamp to secure these, and the drill bit to align them. Just trying to get things straight across. Now do note that the inner fender liner, if you got that, is going to also mount back here to this side. So just keep that in mind. But basically what I'm looking for is just a straight through shot with this 7/16 inch bit. All right, back to the passenger side. I forgot a hole. Why didn't you guys tell me I forgot to drill that hole out? All right, so this bottom screw was kind of a booger to get to. This is the factory screw, the pinch seam screw. The problem is it's just not long enough. I mean, just barely long enough to grab threads. And with all this extra stuff, I ended up having to use some creative clamping. So essentially what I have is this top clamped a little bit in there to bring everything together, and then the bottom, the two pieces of the pinch seam area clamped together, and then also pushing sort of the fender up into there so I could just get a few turns on it. Once I got a few turns on it, I'm good now. I can undo that. And can finish tightening things down now. All right, so now before we tighten these down, we do need to add this support bracket into the mix. So it's basically gonna lay in here and provide additional support for the fender. So, all right, so for these, if you lift your hood, it's actually easier to get to the back side of them with the wrench. A little harder to get the hardware in there, but certainly once you get it started, the wrench will fit right through here nicely. All right, once you've got the top of the bracket secured, you now know where to drill for that bottom hole. So rather than remove it, drill, and then replace it, I'm just gonna drill right through it and then paint it up after I'm done. I, for one, think this is much easier if you pull the front grill off. All right, there we go, more support. All right, I've got all my hardware in and everything is snug, but just finger tight. Now, if you're just doing the fenders, you're pretty much done. You can go through and tighten all these up. But if you're doing the fender liners like I am, you're gonna want to add some parts in before you tighten everything down. So for example, this comes with the fender liner kit. It's actually going to replace those two standoffs that I put in before. And you can see here, the standoffs are built into this. This is going to prevent mud from getting back in here. The other thing we're also going to do is add in the back piece and the front piece. So I'm going to do that before I tighten everything down so I don't have to do things twice.